Sure. So, like you mentioned, I'm an attorney and a lobbyist. I live here in Tallahassee, Florida. I've lived in Florida now for 32 years, and I went to high school. My last 3 years of high school down in South Florida, in Coral Springs, Florida, at JP Taravella High School. And after that, I came up here to Florida State University, graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in History, took some time off working, and then decided to go back to law school and did law school here at Florida State, graduated in 2006, and been working in governmental affairs ever since I graduated from Florida State Law School. But I am a licensed attorney and an active member of the Florida Bar. So if I ever need to find another career, I could certainly get into law as well.
Right? So you're originally from New Jersey?
Yeah, I grew up in central New Jersey in a town called Marlboro, and when I was in high school, or right before my sophomore year of high school, we moved down to South Florida. But still have a lot of ties and friends up there in the Northeast, and always consider Marlboro my hometown, even though I graduated high school in Coral Springs, but still a Jersey boy through and through.
Hmm. Yeah. Where'd you go for college?
Here, FSU.
Oh,
I did both undergrad and law school at Florida State.
so you're very familiar with the town.
Oh, yes. I've been in Tallahassee in August. It will be 29 years that I've been, for the most part, here in Tallahassee. I've left a couple times, but really I've considered Tallahassee home for 29 years come August.
Okay. So, um, can you tell us how you knew Charlie Adelson?
Yeah, sure. I actually knew Wendy before I knew Charlie. When I moved to Florida back in 1992, it just so happened that my folks had a friend that they had known for a long time, a family living just two doors down from us. And so I got to know their son, and he introduced me to his group of friends. I was the new kid and trying to make new friends, and one of those people was Wendy Adelson. And so I got to know Wendy, and through Wendy, I found out that she had a brother that was also a rising sophomore at Taravella. And so when school started, I met Charlie for the first time. We were not friends or anything like that. We knew who each other were, but that was about it. And then I graduated high school in 1995, and as you tend to do, you lose touch with people from high school. We went to different colleges. He went to the University of Central Florida. I went to Florida State. And then at our 10-year high school reunion that would have been in the summer of 2005, he happened to be there. I was there with my then girlfriend, my now wife. We hung out with a group of people, and Charlie was part of that group. Had a great time, all of us, just hanging out, and kind of reconnected and kept in touch a little bit. And then later that year, actually, it would have been a couple of weeks later, we happened to start school up again. It was my last year, my 3L year of law school. I'll never forget, I was upstairs getting ready for a trial advocacy class, which was on the second floor at the law school. There used to be a courtroom. And I was waiting outside that courtroom, and I looked over and I noticed that this girl was looking at me. And I just kind of looked at her and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's Wendy Adelson. And I had not seen her probably since I graduated high school at that point. So it had been ten years. And at that point, she told me that I believe it was fiance, maybe just boyfriend, I can't remember, but that he was a new professor at Florida State, Danny Markel. And that she was doing her third year as a visiting student at FSU. And so we started connecting, hanging out. She introduced me to Danny. We became, quick friends. And because, Tallahassee is not a huge Jewish community, and we were, part of that small community, we really connected pretty immediately and did some Jewish holidays together, some other events at their house. I was actually at their housewarming party when they bought the house on Trescott. So yeah, got to know them very well, and had a friendship with them for many years.
Interesting. So when you all were younger, did Charlie and Wendy also go to synagogue?
I don't know. We when we moved to Coral Springs, the synagogue that we tried out there was actually not in Coral Springs. We went to one in Plantation, and I can tell you that they were not members of that congregation. But I don't know if they actually attended synagogue. I do know that that she had a bat mitzvah. I wasn't there. That was after or before I had moved there. But I know I've heard that before, and I'm sure Charlie had a bar mitzvah as well. So that would lead me to believe that they went to synagogue, but I couldn't say for sure.
Yeah. And did you mention that you had gone on a sort of a date with Wendy?
Yeah, that's a I get asked that a lot. So when I first moved there and was introduced to her, it was kind of like one of those high school setups. Hey, I think you really like her. Hey, you'd really like him. And so we did go on a date. I don't know if I would ever say that we quote unquote dated. I think we went to a movie one time. Gosh, this was over 30 years ago, so it's hard to remember all of it. But yeah, we definitely, had kind of that small little date relationship for a couple weeks. And it's funny you bring that up because I was just talking to one of my friends in New Jersey who had come down and visited and stayed with us for a while, and he actually met Wendy when all back when I first moved there. And he asked me, just today, was asking me about, hey, anything new in the Adelson trial? So, because he remembers her as well.
Yeah. So what was your impression of her when you
I,
guys were teens?
I'll tell you. I mean, I thought she was a great person back then. I enjoyed talking to her. I enjoyed getting to know her. Gosh, I would have been 15. I think she was 14. She was an attractive girl. I mean, for when you're that age. And then when I reconnected with her, even in Tallahassee, we first became friends again. She was great. I don't know if it was manipulation or what, but she was just a regular person. She was goofy, still an attractive, person back then, and just enjoyed hanging out with her. And my wife liked her well enough. She thought she was super nice, and we both really liked Danny as well.
Yeah. And what about Charlie? What was his
Yeah,
reputation?
in high school, again, we had different friends, a different friend group. He was not someone I would have necessarily hung out with in high school. And then I had heard that when he was in college, he was much into the party scene, and I had heard about steroids and things like that, which, you can look at me and tell I'm not into steroids at all. Just not my thing. And I did my fair share of partying in college. I was a fraternity guy and all that. But he and I probably would not have been close in college if we'd have gone to the same school. But when I reconnected with him at the 10-year reunion, you're all a little bit more mature. You're getting into your professions at that point. I don't know if he was in dental school or already a practicing dentist, but he was certainly we had a good time. We all were of age at that point, and you know, took a few drinks and had a good time. It was a fun time.
Okay. So you probably have heard by now, people have said, or actually it was Jeff who said she had some sort of aura where she could cast a spell over people. So did you get that sense?
Yeah, I looking back on things now, I think that there was definitely she had a way of engaging people, and looking now, I look at it as a way of manipulating people. But, I joked about it. I think the first time I was on Surviving the Survivor with Joel, I joked about it that I had friends that called her Hot Wendy. Oh, how's your friend Hot Wendy doing? Things like that. But, you know, since now looking hindsight, looking back on things, I certainly see what Jeff was talking about, and but I do think it was a way of manipulation and a way of her getting what she wanted out of people.
I see. Yeah. So were you and your wife close friends with both Dan and Wendy?
Um, I would say I was closer with both of them, and that probably goes to there were some events that I went to that my wife was not at. My wife is not Jewish, and not that I mean, she would go to any of those events. In fact, my wife makes great matzo ball soup for a non-Jewish woman, and but I got to know them or I got to know Danny a little better than my wife ever did. But certainly, she was very fond of both of them at the time. Thought very highly of them, and anytime that we were invited to go to their place or to an event with them, she was always willing to go and happy to do it.
Yeah. Was Dan ever your professor?
No, so he came to Florida State. So I actually did not do my 1L year at Florida State. I did it at another school and transferred. And Dan mostly taught criminal law, which for those of you that have been to law school know that that's a 1L course. He did teach some higher level crim courses as well, but I knew I was not going to do criminal law. So after taking crim law 1 and 2, I was done with crim law. Didn't want to do it anymore. So I never had Danny as a professor, but I do have a lot of friends here in Tallahassee that did have him as a professor and talk about just what a great professor he was. He was tough. He truly believed in the Socratic method of making you work for it. But unfortunately, I never did have him as a professor.
Okay. Is it true that Dan would actually lock the doors to the classroom so people couldn't come in if they were late?
Oh, I don't even know that. That's great
Oh,
if
okay.
true. No, I don't know. I'd have to ask some of my friends who had him as a professor. I'm going to write that down to ask and see
Okay.
if he
I think,
did.
yeah, I
That's
think that
great.
was in the Epstein book.
Okay,
So,
okay.
yeah. But
I
what were
probably
your,
I probably would have been fine because I'm one of those perpetually early people. I kind of
oh,
live
good.
by the Nick Saban rule. If you're 5 minutes, if you're not 5 minutes early, you're 5 minutes late.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people that probably would have been locked out of his classroom.
Oh, okay. Well, so what were your general impressions of Dan when you met him?
I was very fond of Danny from the beginning. I thought he was funny. He could certainly needle you and kind of push you on issues. He and I we saw eye to eye on a lot of things, but we had different political views on things, and so we would talk about that from time to time. He would, he liked to push to get good conversation going. And he was a very conscientious person, always checked in on friends. He was one of those people that like never missed the opportunity to congratulate you on something or wish you a happy birthday. And I've mentioned it before, my birthday's the day after his. So there was, it was always kind of like a happy birthday, my almost birthday twin, kind of things like that. And just a really good guy and certainly brilliant. I mean, extremely brilliant.
Yeah. So have you seen those negative comments about him on YouTube? Like how did that make you feel when you would see these
It's
strangers
it's
saying bad
bothersome.
things?
It's extremely bothersome because people want to talk about him who don't know him. And they do always say that you tend to glorify people after they die. And I'm sure that there's, some of that goes on as well. But, people like to say that he treated Wendy poorly and all this. And beyond her saying that, I don't know anyone that ever saw that. Donna and Wendy seem to be the only ones that ever say that. I never witnessed him treating her poorly. And again, you don't know what goes on behind closed doors in someone's marriage. And anyone who's married knows marriage is tough and it's not perfect, and there are always ups and downs. But it just, the things that I hear or read on YouTube or other places, they do not tend to correspond with the person that I knew.
Yeah. Well, did they seem pretty happy most of the time before the separation?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you ever go back, and I don't know if it's still there, but man, his Facebook page, I know his Facebook page is still there, but I don't know if all the posts from pre-divorce, or if he cleared them out. But they were always just glowing about Mrs. Bear and the Cubs, and that's what they called each other, and you know all of it about his amazing wife and his two kids. And I mean, it would be hard to think anything other than he was happy. And that's why when I found out that they were separated and that they were getting divorced, I was shocked because, I mean, I never saw it. And it's funny because you are not funny, but I remember hearing, and maybe it was when Wendy did that writing podcast, and she talked about how no one ever knew she was unhappy. And I guess, she guesses she did a good job of hiding it. And she did, because no one ever did know she was unhappy.
How did you find out that they were separated?
I actually found out, there was a girl who I worked with who also, her and her husband were friends with Wendy and Danny as well. Um, and about, gosh, probably right around the time that she separated from him in that September, when, I guess Danny was in New York and she kind of moved out. It was right around that time. This girl and I were talking, and we're like, "Man, have you heard from Wendy or Danny recently?" No, and neither of us had. And then about a week or two later is when she came in and she goes, "Oh my God, did you hear that Wendy and Danny are getting a divorce?" And that's when, it was just shocking to us. So that's when I heard about it first.
You part of the group of people who were kind of helping to plan Dan's birthday that year?
Uh, I'm sorry?
Oh, were you involved with planning Dan's 40th birthday?
Oh, no, no, I was not.
Okay.
Nope, no.
Okay.
I remember the time around when that was happening, but I was not part of the group that was planning it.
Yeah. From what I heard, it sounded like Wendy was just acting like she was planning the birthday and trying to get things together, like birthday messages. So people were totally surprised that she had split from him because during this happy planning acting,
Yeah.
she was
Yeah, and
plotting.
and and so that happened. It would, from what I understand, it was September that she moved out. He was in New York, and it was the September of, that would have been
Well,
2012, I believe.
yeah.
And Danny's birthday is October 9th. So you're talking a matter of weeks. And, I remember hearing about his 40th birthday. And then she moved out, and so it would have been actually probably right around his 40th birthday is when I had heard that they were getting divorced, because it was, like I said, it was a couple of weeks, I think, after she had moved out. So had to be right around the birthday time.
Yeah. So did you talk to Dan soon after this happened?
No, it was one of those things where I just didn't feel comfortable approaching either one of them. When people are going through things like that, I'd rather not get involved, especially when you're friends with both of them. I definitely, I wasn't going to take sides or anything like that. I certainly was closer over the years with Wendy than I was with Danny. So, he probably would have thought, if anything, I would have been on Wendy's side. I wasn't. That's one of those things where, like I said, you don't know what's going on behind closed doors. So I pretty much just kind of stayed out of it, and did not approach either one of them about it. I reached out to Wendy a couple times, just, hey, how are things going? This was like well after that, because we had run into each other, and then we would text or email. But other than that, no, I did not want to ask what was going on, why it was happening, or anything like that.
So you weren't like a shoulder to cry on.
No, no, definitely not. Definitely not for either one of them.
Yeah. What about your wife? Was
No,
she
she
involved?
she she wouldn't have been close enough to Wendy to do that. So no, she would have stayed out of it as well.
See. Okay. Um, so uh what about with your friends though? Did you see a lot of people forced to take sides in their divorce?
In my group of friends, of the ones that knew her, there were some whispers about things, about, oh, I'm hearing it's getting contentious or it's ugly, but nobody really none of my friends that knew them really took sides. Um, I know that there were friends who did take sides on both sides, but the ones that I'm close with, they did not at the time, no.
Were you still going to the same synagogue with
I
Dan?
n No, I was not a member of the congregation that Danny was a member of. He was more in the more conservative temple of Shomrei Torah, and I was born more I was raised more reform. So even though we would do Jewish events or Jewish holidays with them, we did not go to the same temple.
Okay. Um, so how much interaction did you have with Dan before he was killed?
We spoke. I ran into him a couple of times. I actually had done, gosh, this would have been probably shortly, it would have been the spring of 2014. I'm trying to think. If it was the spring of 2014, I was asked to speak on a panel at the law school. And I actually ran into him while I was there at the law school, and I spoke to him for quite a bit. And it was one of those, oh, let's catch up, let's grab something to eat sometime, and for sure. And as life tends to be, my wife was at the time pregnant with our second child. I had I guess, a 3-year-old at home at the time, and he had two young kids. You always say, "Hey, have your people call my people," and you tend to lose track of time. And a couple months later, it was too late for us to have that lunch that we had planned on.
So that was your last interaction with him
My
in
last
person?
in person interaction, yes. We actually communicated on Facebook not too long after that. I think I had a question I had to ask him. It was something law school related, and we spoke on Facebook Messenger for a little bit. But then after that, that was probably the last time we spoke, and that would have probably been April or May of 2014.
Yeah. So how did you find out that he had been shot?
So I first heard about the shooting on Trescott, and that afternoon. I had been in a meeting at my office in the morning, and I went back into my office and pulled up TallahasseeDemocrat.com, and I saw that there was an article about a shooting, and I looked, and it was on Trescott. And so I called my wife, who works for the state, and I said, hey, did you see the Democrat? There was a shooting. She goes, I just heard something about it. I said, well, it was on Trescott. That's where Danny and Wendy lived when they were married. And at the time, I didn't know that Danny was still living in that house. So I said, gosh, I hope everything's okay. I wonder if he still lives there. And she's like, I don't know. And I didn't even think, you can look that up on the property appraiser's website, but, just kind of went about the rest of my day. The next morning, I woke up and I saw a friend of mine, Tamara Demko, had posted on Facebook about it being Danny. She had posted something about how, she couldn't believe it. And I kind of went into shock, and I went into the room. My wife, I mentioned she was pregnant. She was actually like ready to give birth pregnant at this point. And I went into the bedroom and I said, "Oh my gosh, it was Danny." And she said, "What was Danny?" And I said, "It was Danny who got shot." And she just, I mean, she looked up at me and she said, "It was a hit." And I was like, "No, no." And she goes, "100% it was a hit." And it just, and I've told this story a few times since then. It still, it makes the hairs on my arms stand up, because she just knew right away, partially because she's a criminal appeals attorney. So she reads about this stuff all the time and deals with it. But also she just had this intuition that that's what had occurred. And sadly, I was wrong and she was right. It certainly was.
Um, what about your bigger circle of mutual friends? Did they also suspect the Adelsons soon afterwards?
I think that it was kind of split. I think that there were a lot of people that probably did, and then there were others that didn't want to believe that it could happen that way. I think I fall into the category of I did not want to believe that someone that I had been friends with for so long, that her or her family could have anything to do with it. And what people have to remember is that in 2014, when this happened, we didn't have the benefit of going back and now watching Wendy's initial interview with police. We didn't know about Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera. We didn't know anything about Catherine Magdanoa. So for at least 2 years, all we knew was that Danny had been shot, had died, and that there was a Prius that might have been involved. That's really all we knew. And we all knew Wendy didn't have a Prius, nor did Charlie for that matter. So, I mean, we really did not have the benefit of knowing what the Tallahassee Police Department knew. And they didn't even know all that much at the time. So we're going off of the fact that Danny had been shot and killed, and that's all we knew. And so, your heart and your mind want to believe that a friend of yours could never be involved in this. Now, looking back, there's a lot of weirdness and things like that. Like, I've told the story a couple times that shortly after, it would have been September of 2014, Wendy randomly reached out to me. It was on Google Messenger, which, G Chat or whatever it was called back then. And it was just a weird conversation. Like, she kind of at first pretended like maybe I didn't know what happened, which, I mean, I live in Tallahassee. You knew what happened. Meaning, like, I didn't even know that Danny got shot. And then she was like, "Well, wait, now that I think about it, didn't I see you at the memorial?" And so, I mean, it was just kind of a weird interaction. And then, I reached out to some mutual friends to see if they had talked to Wendy or seen her since she moved to South Florida. And one of them had mentioned to me, "Yeah, she's doing fine. Obviously she's just focused on the boys right now and all that." Um, but it always kind of just stuck on me that, like, she never seemed like too upset about things. It was kind of like, "All right, I'm going to move on with my life." I don't
Yeah,
know.
pack up and
I
move.
Yeah, I wouldn't have been able to move on that quickly.
Mhm. I mean, didn't you think it was kind of weird that they had just been in this kind of divorce custody case and she
Yeah,
wanted to move, and then
yeah,
bam, 3 days later they drive off and don't talk to the police again?
yeah. And again, back then though, we didn't know that she didn't talk to the police through, like
Yeah.
right after it happened. I knew, and I probably would have done the same thing in her shoes. I knew she was in South Florida. And I knew that because a mutual friend and I talked probably about, 4 or 5 days later. And she said she had flown down and she was with her and making sure she was okay. But I didn't think anything suspicious of going down to South Florida right away. You want to be around your family and all that. what's suspicious now looking back is she never came back. She went down to South Florida, and other than her coming up here for those trials, I don't think she's been back to Tallahassee at all. Um, so that is one of those, red flags to me now in hindsight, thinking there's no way like she wasn't somehow involved in this.
Hey, what about, well, didn't a tree fall on Dan's house that fall? Do you think Wendy came back to deal with that, or
No, you talking about the fall after he had been killed?
killed? Yes,
No,
I heard.
I don't know. I don't know about that. I could probably go back and look. But no, I don't think she'd come back here to deal with anything. She probably would have had someone else deal with that. I do know that once they were able to, that the house was put on the market. I actually have friends who, when they moved to Tallahassee, they actually were shown that house, and didn't know it at the time what had happened in the house, but afterwards they were like, "Oh, we're glad we didn't buy that one."
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I saw that the house sold at a big decrease
yeah.
or price cut. Yeah. Well, so you mentioned that you did go to the memorial service for Dan. What was that like?
Yeah, it was emotional and kind of surreal. I've tried to I don't think I've ever had another friend of mine murdered, thankfully. So to go to a memorial service for a friend who had just been shot and killed is very weird, very surreal and emotional. I went by myself. My wife was at home. Like I said, my son was born. That was July 20th. It was Sunday, July 20th. Trying to think. Yes, Sunday, July 20th was the memorial. My son was born July 22nd. So like that's
Oh,
how close my wife
oh,
was to giving birth.
oh.
So she couldn't go. She just was not feeling up to it. And I pulled in. It was hard to find parking. I remember that. There were a lot of people. And I pulled in, and I ran into a friend of mine who was another lobbyist for the state, who had Danny as a professor. And so it was nice to see a familiar face and be able to, sit with her and just, kind of talk. And we were both still in shock. I think everybody was. I remember when the Markels walked in, I got just this awful feeling. Like I can't even imagine what they're feeling right now. And then I remember Wendy coming into the room, and she just had this like deer in headlights look. I don't know if I would say it was shock, or it certainly wasn't sadness. I would have expected just and I know that they were divorced and I know that they didn't get along, but at the same time, that's the father of your children. And so for me, I would have thought that she would have been just an emotional wreck, but she came in holding the hand of one of the kids, carrying the other, and just kind of made her way to where she sat. And it was just a very surreal experience.
Did she speak at that service?
No, no. And I don't remember her speaking to a whole lot of people either. I know I never spoke to her, and that's kind of what prompted that whole later on that September of 2014 online conversation we had. But no, I don't remember her seeing her really speak to anyone. Maybe her parents, and that was it.
Did you think when she contacted you in September that she was digging for information?
You know, I never thought about it then. And I really never thought about it until you just asked that question. It's very possible. She knew my wife was an appellate attorney, a criminal appellate attorney. She knew that she had ties to the state's attorney's office. So I don't know, maybe she was. And she also knew that I was very, and I say this, and it sounds much more arrogant than it's meant to be, but that I'm connected in Tallahassee. I know a lot of people. And so maybe she was digging. Maybe she wanted me to say, something like, hey, nobody here or nobody involved thinks it was you or anything like that, which I didn't say to her. But maybe she was digging. I never thought of that until it's a good question.
Because I'm just thinking it seems kind of weird that out of the blue,
It was totally
what was it,
random,
2 months
totally
later?
random.
Because it
Yeah.
sounds like you weren't that close to her, you know?
We were, and we were close prior to that, particularly like I would say before we both had kids. When you have kids, and they go to their preschools, you tend to get in with who their little friends are and do play dates and things like that. And
Yeah.
because our kids were at different preschools, we didn't see each other all that much, but it was very weird for her to reach out to me that way. It wouldn't have been weird if, you know, hey, I heard you're in South Florida or so, or hey, I ran into your parents and it made me think of you or something like that because my parents are still in South Florida, so that would have been entirely possible. Or she could have, run into a mutual friend, like the one who introduced us, but it wasn't anything like that. I still have the conversation. I went back and looked at it. I'm like, totally unprompted. It was the first thing she said was, "Hi, Jared." And it was just like, not like, hey, I ran into so and so and we were talking about you or nothing like that. It was just so random.
So that's the last time you communicated?
That's the last time we spoke one on one, as far as communication with each other. I did get an email. I can't remember exactly when it was. It might have been 2016. But it was more of a mass email, and it was about the Adelsons telling their side of the story. It was an email that I got from Wendy that was like, hey, we really appreciate all your support over the years, and please click this link for my side of the story or something like that. Again, that was weird too that she would send that out, and I know it was sent to multiple people, not to me directly, but it was a very strange statement, and all about how the Adelsons want nothing but the killers to be caught and prosecuted and all that. So it was just, again, it very weird.
That PR piece that was sort of drafted by attorneys
Yeah,
went to the media? Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that was the same thing. Yeah. And
Mhm.
then, like, maybe occasionally, I'd get a message on Facebook for a happy birthday or something like that. But other than that, I hadn't talked to her probably since September 2014.
Okay. Did you ever think of just contacting her directly, and kind of asking her questions,
I thought about it a
especially
couple times,
later? Yeah.
especially leading up to the first trial. The Sigfredo Garcia and Catherine Magbanua trial. But at the same time, I knew it wasn't the smart thing to do. But I thought about it. I thought about, especially I knew she was going to be in Tallahassee. That was another thing is I knew she would be here. Um, and that was around the time. So that would have been 2019. That was around the time where I started really shifting my thoughts of, I always quickly after they arrested, Katie and Sigfredo and Louis, quickly I knew the family was involved in some way. And Charlie and Donna for sure. But I still kind of, wanted to believe that Wendy wasn't involved. But her testimony when she testified in that trial, and then when they started releasing her interview with police, it just became all too clear that there's no way this happened without her knowing about it.
Yeah. Well, during all those years, were you watching everything or keeping really close tabs on Dan's case?
Yeah, for sure. I think all of us that had connections to Danny and Wendy in any way, and then for certain those of us that had multiple connections to this, we've all been in keeping in very close contact. I actually have a group of high school friends. We have a group chat on Facebook, and we call it jury duty because we watch. We've watched all the trials and keep in touch about it, and we talk about it. And some of them have run into folks in South Florida, whether it be Wendy or friends of Wendy's, and we keep each other up to date on what we see, what we hear, and certainly as things progress in the trials, we keep in touch. But I think everyone in Tallahassee that had any connection to Danny and Wendy have been following this as closely as they can.
Yeah. Were you involved with that Justice for Dan message where somebody said that people should support Wendy? She didn't have anything to do with it, something to that effect. I think I saw that maybe
Um,
2015, 2016, maybe.
Yeah, that no, at the time when that came out, and I remember vaguely hearing about that. I was not involved in the Justice for Dan movement per se, and I think at the time, again, there's a lot of people that wanted to believe Wendy was innocent. And to be fair, there are still a lot of people who believe Wendy is innocent. If you read a lot of the comments on YouTube or on social media, there are people that believe that she had nothing to do with it, and she is innocent until proven guilty. But I just knowing what I've seen, what I've read, and also things I've heard that are not necessarily public at this point, things that people have told me. Again, I believe otherwise.
Yeah. Have you been contacted by any police officers or
No,
investigators?
I've been asked this before. No, I don't think that I have anything that would necessarily help law enforcement in any way. If they wanted to see that 2014 conversation I had with Wendy, I'm happy to turn that over to them. But there's just nothing that they would get from that. I have my own theories and analysis and thoughts on this, but I don't think that I'd be of any use to law enforcement. That said, I'm always happy to talk to them if they need me to.
Sure. So do you happen to know Kappelman?
I've never met Georgia, although I did recently find out that her father is one of my fraternity brothers, so I think that's pretty
Oh,
cool.
hey, that's good.
Also from Florida State too, so from the same chapter, but he was there a little before I was. And he was also a quarterback at Florida State, so they are very ingrained in the FSU and Tallahassee community. But no, I have not met Georgia. I look forward to the day that I get to. I have met Jack Campbell, who is our state attorney. He is a very good person. My wife actually knows him better than I do, obviously through her role with the state, and what she does in criminal appeals. But he is we are very lucky to have him as our state attorney in Tallahassee.
Yeah. Have you tried to talk to Jack about Dan's case?
I ran into Jack. My wife did a charity Dancing for the Stars thing back in December, and she did great.
Oh,
And Jack
good.
was there because he had done it previously and was there to support an
Mhm.
employee of his who was doing it this year. And he came over to talk to my wife and tell her what a great job she did. And I just reintroduced myself to him and shook his hand. And I said, I want you to know I've been following the Adelson case very closely. I went to high school with Charlie Adelson, and this was weeks after Charlie had been sentenced, or not sentenced, convicted. It was right before he had been sentenced, or maybe right after. I can't remember the exact dates, but and he just kind of smiled at me and gave me a look, and you know, we both knew what each other were thinking.
What? Which was fun. Was he afraid that at first you
Which
were
was
Charlie's friend?
no, 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 no. That it doesn't end with Charlie.
Yeah. And supposedly he said there's more, right?
He has said that there's more evidence than we know of, which is, any lawyer knows that. the prosecution is going to use what they feel they need to use to get convictions. And if there are things that they can hold back for other reasons, they're going to do it. And they've
Yeah.
been very, very calculated in this. I know that there are people that don't like the fact that it's taken 10 years, that, we didn't have the first conviction on this until 2019, which was, 5 years after Danny had been murdered. But I will tell you that I trust this state's attorney's office. They are doing things the right way. And I would not be shocked to see more prosecutions even beyond Donna.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's pretty much what my subscribers wanted to ask you was, do you think Wendy or Harvey will get arrested?
So I know there's a lot of conflicting opinions on this. That I know that there are attorneys here in Tallahassee that don't believe Wendy will ever be arrested because they don't believe that there's enough evidence out there. I think there may not be direct evidence, but there's a lot of circumstantial evidence that links Wendy to this. And when you add them all up and you get to the totality of the evidence, I do believe that there will come a day that she is arrested. Hopefully sooner rather than later. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm not a criminal attorney. I don't practice in that space. But I've certainly, followed this case from the beginning, and I've seen a lot of the evidence, and I haven't seen all of it. But I do believe that there is a lot out there. And I also believe Georgia wants to go after Wendy. I don't know that for a fact, but if you look at their interactions, I don't think that they will ever be having happy hour together.
Yeah. Um, I have some more questions to
Sure.
ask you. So thanks for your time.
No, thank
Um,
you.
sure. So I know, was it on STS where you mentioned you thought Wendy really was asked to buy bullet bourbon for the stuck to bar party? Why do you think that's true?
So and unless someone sent me a fake copy of an invitation for an engagement party, that same day at the same address that, people had said that the party was at, I've seen the invitation, that said, please bring bullet bourbon or your favorite spirit or something similar to that, language, but it definitely had the words bullet bourbon on it. So there's a lot of people that think, that she was buying that as a reference to a shooting, but I'm just, this is what I've seen, what a friend of mine who knew the people involved, sent me. And so that's where I get that from.
Okay. So you don't think it could have been made up?
I mean, it could have. There's a lot of things that people can do with computers these days. But I do believe that the person who showed it to me and sent it to me, they wouldn't have done so unless they believed it was real and got it from a source that was very reliable.
Sounds weird though. Like who specifically says
Uh,
bring bullet bourbon or
oh,
something else? Are they
I mean,
enamored with it?
I have a good friend who he specifies which bourbons he wants me to bring to his house for certain parties. So
Okay. Hmm. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Well, what are the chances, right?
bourbon drinkers can be very, very particular.
Uh-huh. And this person just loved bullet bourbon.
Yeah, yeah.
Although
It's a pretty decent bourbon.
mhm. Although fancy fiction says it was actually rye whiskey that
Well,
that she bought.
but yeah, but
It's different.
they do. Bullet makes different different ones too. So she probably bought the wrong one then.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Because fancy says it's green label. It's rye
Yeah,
whiskey.
there's an orange label Bullet, there's a green label, and I believe there's a blue label too.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I don't know my bourbons. So, by the way, do you know fancy fiction?
We actually had an opportunity to meet during Charlie's trial. And we certainly have talked and communicated. And I think she does a great job.
Yeah. So were you also watching deep dive true crime for many years?
Yeah, I've watched a lot of what he has done as well. I haven't had it. I think I ran into him at the courthouse one time, not during the trial, during a hearing, but yeah, I've watched a lot of his stuff as well. I think
Yeah.
I've pretty much seen like almost every, YouTube video or interview on this case. I'm sure I've missed a few, but there's so many people that are doing such great work to try and ensure that justice is brought for Danny that I try to keep up on as much of it as possible.
Yeah. Speaking of which, how did you become a guest on STS?
I was on Court TV with Joel. I had gotten asked to do Court TV twice now. The first time I had actually declined. I wasn't going to do any interviews or anything like that. And then a good friend of mine, Dave Ehrenberg, kind of suckered me into doing it. So I did a Court TV hit with Dave, and then they asked me again to come on another time, and they randomly paired Joel and I up. And afterwards, Joel and I communicated, and he's like, "Hey, would you mind coming on STS?" And so I said, "No, I'd be happy to talk to you." And Joel and I are both, Central Jersey guys, and have a lot in common, and so it was a great conversation. He and I spoke for quite a while that first time, and I've been on a few times since, and actually had the opportunity, actually just Wednesday of this last week, to meet Joel and Carm here in Tallahassee and have dinner with them, and then attend his book signing last night.
Oh, that's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have the book, but I've read maybe one page so far.
Okay.
I haven't had time, but I do have the
Yeah.
book. So
Yeah,
cool.
it's a great story. It is a great story.
Yeah.
Carm is an amazing, amazing woman.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing to think she's what, 84,
Yeah,
84
she'll be
years
85
old.
soon. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's on YouTube. Yeah,
Yep.
that's
Yep.
great.
Right.
Well, but see, how did Court TV find you in the first place, though?
Dave Ehrenberg.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
just asking.
Yeah, so Dave had been asked to go on, and he texted me. I was on my way to a work event, and he's like, "Hey, I'm going on Court TV tomorrow, and I want you to go on with me." And I was like, "No, Dave, no, you go, and that's your thing." And he's like, "No, you knew Danny, you knew Wendy, you know all these people. It will be great for them to hear from you." And so, he ended up a few minutes later texting myself and the person from Court TV. This is before I even said yes. And he's like, "Hey, this is Jared Ross. He's going to go on with me tomorrow. Send him the information." I'm like,
Oh,
"Dave." But, when Dave Ehrenberg asks me to do something, I tend to say yes because he's a good friend.
and how did you meet Dave?
Dave was a senator, a state senator in Florida, and being a lobbyist, I got to know him through that, and we've kept in touch over the years. I've known him now probably about 15, 16 years, and just have remained friends ever since we met.
Yeah. So do you plan on continuing to help with his channel?
Yeah, so recently, David asked me if I would do some short videos on my thoughts on the Danny Markel murder and the trials. And so I've done several videos. I've got a few more in the pipeline coming, and I know he and I are going to speak some more as we move toward Donna's trial. I know Joel has asked me if I would come on again as he starts kind of shifting back into this, and I said I'd be happy to. And then the biggest thing for me, that I'm probably most excited about is, recently Karen Halpern Cyphers asked me if I would join the board of Justice for Dan, which, as you
Mhm.
know, is a grassroots community that was started shortly after Danny's murder, as a Facebook page, really to try and bring justice for Dan. And it has evolved over the years, and it is something that we are really kicking into high gear. We are going to be rolling out some projects that we're working on soon to help keep Danny's life and legacy alive. Particularly his passion for scholarship. And so, we are really excited about that. Want to be clear about a couple of things with Justice for Dan. First off, it's not a nonprofit, it's not a 501c3. So, as people do make contributions at this time, they're not tax deductible. But we would be, we will only be able to do the amazing things we want to do to help keep Danny's legacy alive through those contributions. And again, those contributions are not going to go to the boys. They're not going to Danny's kids. That's not what we're doing this for. They have other means that they're going to be taken care of. And it's not going to go to the Markels. This is about us doing some projects to keep Danny Markel's legacy alive as a legal scholar. And like I said, we'll have a lot more information about that soon. And I'm very much looking forward to the rollout of those. Myself and some of the other board members are actually talking this morning about that, and we're getting ready to roll it out pretty soon.
That's great. So it's still in the early phases, right? So you don't have
Yeah,
like specific like
not
activities. Yeah.
we have some specific things that we're talking about amongst the group, but we're not at the point yet where we can roll it out. Just because we need to get a few more details ironed out before we can do that. But I think when we do, people are going to be very excited about it and are going to think it's a great idea.
Mhm. Okay, great. Well, I'm
Yep.
sorry to jump around, but I
No,
know
you're
we're
fine.
we're almost at an hour and there's still more questions. So, okay, so thank you for your time again.
Yeah.
So tell me, like, when Charlie's trial happened, did you actually go to watch?
So I wasn't there for the whole thing. Fortunately, I have a day job too, that
Yeah.
that helps pay my bills. But also fortunately, I worked very close to the courthouse, downtown in Tallahassee. So I literally, during my lunch breaks or in between meetings, I was able to walk on over to the courthouse and sit in the gallery for some times and be able to witness what was going on. I was in the courtroom when Wendy testified. There was a time where I'm sure she saw me there, which was kind of my point. I kind of wanted to have her see that there are people that she knows that
Mhm.
knows she did something. Same with Charlie. I was there when he testified. I also was there for a couple of his hearings pre-trial.
Oh,
And there was one where I was there with a friend of mine, the same friend actually that I was at the memorial service with. She and I went to the courthouse and we were sitting there and he turned around. They were having a sidebar and he turned around and looked over his shoulder and looked right at me. And my friend turned to me and said, "He totally saw you." And then we heard him whisper, because it's not a huge courtroom, and the acoustics, they kind of carry. We heard him whisper to Rashbaum, "I went to high school with that guy." And it was kind of funny to see that moment happen.
mhm. Did you have any urge to go up to him during the break to say
Nah,
hi?
nah, I have nothing.
No.
I have nothing to say to him. As far as I'm concerned, he's a murderer. And he's responsible for the death of my friend and of a wonderful father. So if I had anything to say to him, it wouldn't be too kind. So
Yeah.
I'm better off just not saying anything to him at all.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's not like he would just break down and admit it to you,
Yeah,
like, "Oh, I
yeah.
did it, I
Nope,
did it,"
nope, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Well, what about with Wendy? Because at that point, she hadn't defriended you yet on Facebook. So what about that? Did you feel like, should I say hi? Should I go up to her, act like you're still
Yeah,
friends?
it, I was, and at that point, I had not done any shows or spoken out in public or anything like that. I had given some information behind the scenes to some people, but I hadn't, um, hadn't been public about, the fact that I knew them. But no, again, I really didn't want to talk to her. Probably because, again, much like her brother, I don't know, I'm just so disgusted by what happened that I don't know what I would say. Um, just, but it probably wouldn't be too nice. So, like mom
Yeah.
always said, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all.
Yeah. Well, so how did you feel when you heard Wendy and Charlie testifying?
So the first time I heard Wendy testify in 2019, um, I got annoyed because it just you could tell she was playing lawyer on the witness stand. Like she was trying to manipulate questions and, I mean, perfect example. Would you say your parents are wealthy? Well, what do you mean by wealthy? It's like, yes, your parents are wealthy. You can admit it. No, some people may think less of you because of it, but I think less of you for lying about it. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, we know, and when she talks about not knowing what kind of car her brother drove, we know that's a lie because there's a lot of us that had heard her make fun of Charlie for driving fancy cars in the past. Like, there's nothing to lie about when it comes to things like that. So I got really annoyed by her testimony in the first trial, and then it got worse every other trial because she kept changing stories on things, like the whole "Did you drive down Trescott?" Well, the first time she's interviewed by police, she talks about how she went to drive down Trescott. She turned onto Trescott and then had to make a 3-point turn and turn around. Then she says she never drove near Trescott, or didn't get close enough to know what was going on. It's just a lie. And that's just it's frustrating. And then as far as Charlie, uh, I mean, it was so rehearsed and so matter of fact that you just knew he was full of it.
Yeah. And he thought he did so great on the stand, just because he had an answer or
Yeah.
retort. Yeah.
Yeah, every once in a while saying, that was 10 years ago or 9 years ago, I really can't remember for sure, goes a long way because that's just the truth, I mean, you can't remember everything, and again, for me, the only reason I remember so much about the day that this happened and that whole weekend and is again because my son was born so close to that point. So there's
Mhm.
reference points for me of my little boy being born. Other than that, like, some of the questions that Georgia asked him or even that Dan Rashbound asked him, I mean, if that was me and I'm thinking back to 2014, 2015, even 2020, 2022, I'd have been like, I'm sorry, I can't remember that specifically, but this is what I do remember. He knew every little thing. Part of it because his conversations were being recorded in 2016. So, he's gotten to hear them several times, but he just knew too much about too much.
Mhm. Yeah, he had all these specific quotes of what Katie
Yep.
told him and what Katie did. I'm like, give me
Yep.
a break. She couldn't even remember anything pretty
Nope.
much from 2014. Yeah. So how did you feel when he was convicted?
I was happy. I thought that it was a long time coming and the next in line of people that uh, needed to be put away. I also thought that they would arrest Donna fairly soon after that. A friend of mine and I were texting and she thought maybe within the next 90 days. And I said, I'd be shocked if it wasn't within the next 10 days. And then what was it, 7 days later?
Yeah.
And part of it was because I thought they'd try and flee. I really did. I thought they would try and flee, um, and they did.
Yeah. Can I take credit for calling that in one of my shows where
Yeah,
I portrayed Donna packing up her bags and getting
yeah.
ready to leave? Yeah, but I mean, how did you find out about Donna? getting
About her getting
arrested.
arrested?
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember for sure. I think actually, I think I was at a work event, and I looked down at my phone and I had like a bunch of Facebook messages. So, and I think it was that high school group that I'm in that someone happened to see it, and was kind of like, "Is this true? Is this true?" And so then I texted. I remember I texted Dave Ehrenberg because I figured state attorney in Palm Beach, he can call the state attorney in Miami maybe
Yeah.
and find out.
Mhm.
And so I texted Dave, and Dave's like, "What? Let me see if I can find anything out." And then, and then I saw Joel was going on live to do a show, and a whole bunch of people started talking about this, that, and the other thing. And I remember like staying up late to make sure I could see the mugshot because everybody
Yeah.
wanted to see the mugshot.
Yeah, as well as the whole arrest video.
Yep.
That was great to finally
Yeah.
see the whole thing. Yeah. So things have totally changed with YouTube. Now, you know, every little detail, minutiae of these different cases can be put out there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's crazy. I mean, it's funny because you think about the trial of the century back in 1995 and with the OJ trial, and I remember that because that was my freshman year of college. And that was, really the first trial that was like on TV every day. And it's amazing to think, imagine if we had YouTube back then, how different even the trial of the century would have been.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So, let's just wrap things up because it's
Sure.
been over an hour. Um, oh, have you been in touch with Dan's parents or his sister?
I have emailed with Ruth multiple times, and I know that myself and some of the others involved with Justice for Dan, we're going to get together with Ruth when she's here for the next trial. But yes, I have been in touch with her via email. She is very supportive of folks coming forward and speaking up, and very um, thankful for the people that want to keep Danny's memory alive.
That's great. What about his father or sister?
I have the only time I've spoken to Phil and Shelley is at the courthouse during, I think it was during Katie's second trial, her retrial. Yes, it would have been then. I rode an elevator with them and I talked to them and let them know how fond I was of Danny. And they were very thankful to hear that, but I've not been in touch with them since.
I see. Yes. Um, would you like to share any other memories of Dan or Dan with his children?
Yeah, I'll just say again, I say this a lot, and a lot of people refer to this as the Adelson case, and the Adelson trials, and let's always remember that this is the Danny Markel trial, the Danny Markel murder. Let's always make it about him, because he's he's the victim, and the Markels as a whole are the victim. And Danny, if you ever, if you were friends with him on Facebook, you ever got a chance to read through, those boys were his life. I mean, just the things I remember every day there was another post about how amazing his two boys were and how much they meant to him. And that's what I'll remember about Danny the most is how much he loved those boys. And as a father myself, I've got two kids. I love them dearly, and I try and model how much I adore my kids, like he did his, because he truly look. People can say whatever they want about him, and we talked about it a little earlier about negative comments about him that may be out there, but I've never heard anyone say anything about negatively about how he was as a father. That's the most important thing, and so everyone needs to really remember that. And that's why we always say one of the biggest tragedies of this is Ruth and Phil not having the time with those boys that they deserve. so that they could make sure that those boys knew how much Danny loved them. And so if I have one goal through all of this, this isn't about me. The only reason I speak out is so that my friends, memory and scholarship is preserved, and that justice for Dan truly is brought. But if I have one goal, it's that one day these kids may stumble upon a YouTube video that I may have done, or someone else may have done, and that they hear their father, Danny Markel, they were his life for the 3 and 4 years that he had with them. That 3 or 4 years that he had with them, that was an eternity for him, and that's what mattered most.
Very well spoken. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Well, why don't you hang on for a second, but we'll
Sure.
go ahead, say goodbye to the viewers out there. Thank you all so much. And
Thanks,
thank
Judy.
you, Jared, for your time. Take care.